What are the top 6 mistakes that new improvisers make? Today's class is going to go through each of these, and I'm going to suggest a few ways in which you can combat these problems. But before we begin, if you are new to jazz, then I have a new ebook which I've just released, a brand new ebook which is aimed at beginner jazz guitar players. The ebook is called Beginner Jazz Guitar Guide. It's 62 pages, it's a printable PDF, and it comes with audio examples. If you'd like to download your free copy of this, then just click the link below this video. That will take you to a link on my website, and you can download the ebook for free. I highly recommend that if you are new to jazz guitar. It's got everything you need in there to get started, and it's free. So if you haven't got that already, then just go on my website and download your copy today. Okay, so on with today's lesson. What are the top 6 improvisation mistakes that I see in students, and even in my own playing? When I was new to jazz, I came across many of these, so hopefully they'll be useful to you as well. So the first thing is getting lost in the form, and we've all been there. We've been soloing away and we don't know where we are. And if you're new to jazz, this is even worse, because not only do you not know where you are, it's like there's no way of getting back. If your ears are not developed, you're in the midst of a jazz solo, the chord's gone, you can't tell if the chord's major 7, minor 7, dominant 7, then it's like you're in no man's land. You're never going to get back in there, and it can be very embarrassing, and it's certainly happened to me a few times, especially in my early days of playing and learning jazz guitar. So that's the problem, getting lost in the form. How can you address that? How can you get better at that? Well, the first thing that you need to do is to get used to the sounds of jazz chords, really, in these progressions. You know, jazz can become quite an academic thing, really, but really jazz was initially learned 100 years ago, just through learning and listening. And really you want to try and maintain that aspect of the genre now, so that if you can hear a chord progression, you need to be able to hear what's going on. Is it a 2-5-1 chord? Is the chord a major 7 chord, a dominant 7 chord? Is the turnaround going on? So one way in which you can address that is by transcribing chord progressions. If you want to learn the chords to Autumn Leaves, Blue Bossa, Summertime, yeah, you can go in a real book, and I have nothing against using real books, but it's going to be far better for you if you transcribe those chords, because it's training your ears to get used to the sound of them. And yeah, this can be tough to do if you're new to jazz. If you don't know the sound of these, this might take a long time to do for the first time, but that's okay. It just gets easier the more and more that you do it. And really, you can do this with any standard, but certainly sticking to your typical beginner jazz guitar standards is recommended. So things like Blue Bossa, Autumn Leaves, Summertime. If you don't know any of those, the chord progressions to any of those, then work them out by ear, and it will mean that when you come to improvise, then you're not going to get lost so easily. Okay, so that's the first thing. Okay, the second point in this video is not enough language. Okay, so we know that jazz is a language. It's a musical language, and what that means is you have to have ideas, licks, whatever you want to call them, to play for you to sound like jazz. And you know, the early stages of integrating licks into your playing can feel a little bit stiff and awkward, but that's okay too. It's just part of the process, and you need to be able to do it. You know, ultimately you will be able to develop your own lines in your own language, but you need to start by transcribing other lines, learning other lines, and putting that in there. So if you've got a 2-5-1, for example, I'll just put the loop on for a 2-5-1 here. You can hear these chords go. There's C major 7. So the chords are D minor 7, G7, then C major 7. So when you have language, there's a 2-5-1 line right there. Okay, so another one. I'll play this when it comes round. Okay, both of these are examples of lines that you can do, and you know, you may not, it can sound very, like I said, very regimented and very awkward at first, but when you get used to them, it it sounds a bit more musical. Okay, so that's maybe one example that you want to do. You want to have several different major and minor 2-5-1 lines that you can insert into your solos to sound like jazz. So you can learn these lines on my website. I even have a video with 2-5-1 lines, or better yet, you can use your ears, work them out, and put them in your playing so that when you're soloing over a beginner jazz standard like Autumn Leaves, Blue Bossa, whatever it may be, that you've got a piece of language that you can firmly play in there that you know is going to sound good. Because when you're improvising, this material doesn't come from the clear blue sky. It's not beamed down to us. A lot of it is kind of already done in the practice room, and it's, if you have open ears and an open mind, and you have confidence with the process, then you will be able to use these lines in a musical and free way, providing that you stick with them and that you can do kind of what I just did first. Okay, so that's the second point even. So the first point, or the first biggest mistake, is getting lost in the form. The second point that I've just talked about was not enough language. And now the third point that I'm going to talk about is a lack of rhythmic variation. Okay, a lack of rhythmic variation. So if I asked you, what is the most common rhythm used in jazz, what would you say? And feel free to disagree with this in the comment section below, if you do disagree, by the way. But I think most of us will agree that the quaver, or the eighth note rhythm, is the most common rhythm that you see here in jazz transcriptions. And playing quavers and constant quavers or eighth notes is a good rhythm to use to sound like jazz, especially if you can play with the swung triplet feel eighth note. That's going to get you on your way as well. But what I often hear in beginner jazz improvisers is they can improvise pretty melodically and pretty well, again putting on the loop, and that's fine, improvising like this. And that's okay, but what you really want to go to strive for beyond that is more longer eighth note lines, and ultimately you can start to combine both when you have melodic ideas and longer lines. But if you've got a nice flow of eighth notes and quavers when you're playing, that's going to give you a nice continuous flow across a set of changes. Okay, so really what I'm trying to say is not enough rhythm, but especially not enough eighth note lines. Okay, that's one thing that I never seem to hear enough of in new jazz improvisers, and that's because we're just getting our ears and our heads around this new material. But as soon as you can kind of play it, then you want to really try and get these things going, in constant rhythmic values like eighth notes, really. So that would be the third thing, the lack of rhythm variation. So the fourth thing is very common as well, especially if you're from, say, a rock or a blues background, and that is that we don't use all 6 strings of the guitar. Okay, the guitar's a beautiful instrument with a wide range across the neck, but far too often what I hear is that people get locked in just on playing on the top string. So again, putting the loop pedal on, improvising just on the top 3 strings like that. But what I really want to hear, if you're improvising over 2-5-1, there I started low and went higher up on the guitar fretboard, okay? Or you could do vice versa. So there you can see that I was spanning, a nice range of the strings. I wasn't just stuck on the top 3 strings there, and that's going to give you again, going back to my previous point, that's going to make it easier to play quaver lines up and down the instrument. Okay, now this is challenging, so if you can't do that, don't worry. And each of these points really do contain several weeks worth of practice. It's what you're really seeing is me, kind of having practiced some of this stuff and demonstrating it. And when you're working on these tougher rhythms, these longer rhythms, if you have to kind of slow things down and work these phrases out, longer phrases out, and you have to do it without a sense of time. You want to be able to just literally go through the neck out of time. So even if you were just kind of piecing through things, and if you want to go, spend time without any backing whatsoever and just making sure you've got that necessary technique in order to navigate those chord changes, that's okay too. Probably the worst thing you want to do is put some backing on and try and play that because straight away, because the chances are you're most likely not going to be successful, and it can really knock your confidence. So take tempo away from it and try and work out some lines that span the neck in eighth notes without any backing, and then when you feel comfortable with them, put the backing on. Okay, so that is that point, lack of proficiency across the neck. And of course, as you get familiar with that, you also want to make sure that the neck is fairly open as well. Obviously, like I was just saying, the top octaves of things are usually more confident, but you want to be able to play from low to high. That was just a G triad idea, but the same thing can be applied. That's my key of G, going from a G there to there, a nice span across the fretboard rather than just kind of sticking to small parts and in one area. You need to feel confident improvising anywhere on the neck, really. Okay, so that's the fifth point. The final point number 6, is staying at slow tempos for too long. Okay, which again may seem confusing after hearing my other points, but what do I mean by that? Well, I think really one of the things in my mind that starts to separate an intermediate player from a beginner player is maybe that they can improvise at maybe like medium tempos or medium up tempos. I think there's a strong tendency to practice things slow, and of course I couldn't recommend practicing things slow enough. I've just been talking about taking time away altogether and getting them right. But what I mean is that you've been playing, say, studying jazz guitar 6 months to a year, and you've never gone beyond 120 beats per minute. Okay, so certainly if you learn, say, something like Autumn Leaves, and then you learn a few of the tunes and you're starting to feel a bit more confident, then you want to go back to something like Autumn Leaves, Satin Doll, try and get those tempos up 140, 150, and that's going to push your technique, and it's going to increase your confidence with the repertoire, and that's what you need to do. Try and get beyond that 120. It seems to be like the universal tempo, doesn't it? The marching tempo, 120 beats per minute. It's a great tempo, and it's good to practice, but you want to try and aspire beyond that too. Okay, so those are the 6 top jazz improvisation mistakes, really the top 6 beginner jazz guitar improvisation mistakes that I hear in new jazz guitar players. Okay, so just to recap them again, the first was getting lost in the form, the second was not enough language, the third was lack of rhythmic variation, the fourth was not using all 6 strings, the fifth was lack of proficiency across the neck, and the sixth was staying at slow tempos for too long or practicing too slow. So what do you think of these points? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Did I miss any out? If I did, please share them in the comment section below. That would greatly help me out. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like. That would also help me out enormously. If you subscribe, then you're not going to miss any of the new material that I have. And if you click that bell icon, then you're definitely not going to miss any of the new videos and things that I have. So thank you for checking this lesson out. I hope you've enjoyed it.